What's going on, guys? It's your boy Forbi. Today I have another banger for you guys. Today we're going to be going over the best settings that you can have for Apex Legends in season 21. New season just dropped, so we're going to be doing a new video for that. It's been about 5 months and there are some changes that we need to go over. So we are going to be talking about how to increase your FPS, how to increase your visual clarity, how to reduce your input latency. We'll be going over all of the in-game settings, the NVIDIA control panel settings, the updates that I've made to the auto exec in the video config, etc. But as opposed to like normal optimizations, we won't be going into anything like super deep Windows related. But this will just relate to everything Apex. All right. So to get started here, we're going to go into settings and go to gameplay. We're going to start at interact prompt style. We're going to have that to compact. Button hints off. This is personal preference. If you want to have button hints on, it brings the buttons to the bottom of your screen down there. I have it off personally. It just, I know what my binds are. I don't need to have that on. Crosshair damage feedback. I have this off personally. This is also personal preference. If you guys don't know what this does, this is kind of like, having that X crosshair on your screen as opposed to not having it. I used to run that way back in the day, but I turned that off multiple seasons ago. So like I said, it's all personal preference. Going into damage numbers, I have that set to stacking. That is also personal preference. I just have it to where it just stacks the number as opposed to floating, which is where it has like the numbers floating above it. But stacking is the most visually appealing for me personally. Ping opacity, I have that set to faded so that we can see through them. Obituaries, I have those on so that it shows like the death for enemy players. Minimap rotation, we have that on. Weapon auto cycle on empty, I have that on. That is also personal preference for when you completely run out of ammo, it'll switch your weapons, which isn't something most people run into very often, but it's still pretty useful. Now we have always sprint. This was called auto sprint, but we're on always sprint now. I have that set to on. And then auto run. So these are two new settings here. Auto sprint used to be what this was, but it's split into 3 now. So I have this set to always sprint on, but auto run off. So it makes it to where like you're always sprinting, which isn't something you always want to be doing, but it makes it to where you essentially can't walk. But we'll go over my keybinds and you guys will see why I don't prefer this. But I have a walk bind that allows me to walk whenever I want to instead of sprinting. So like if I just hold W, I'm holding sprint, but if I hold shift and W, I start walking. Moving on, we have jetpack control. We have that set to hold. Incoming damage feedback 2D. Taking damage closes death box or crafting menu. You 100% want this off. This setting has gotten so many people killed while trying to armor swap or get something out of a death box, and they get shot and then they freak out. They don't know what's going on. Off-screen portraits, we have this on. Hop up, pop up, definitely keep that off. That is just like a significantly larger UI for when you're hovering over pop-ups, or when you pick it up, it'll show in the bottom right down there. Streamer mode, again, this is personal preference. I have this off personally, but I have anonymous mode on so that my name is not present to other people. Usage sharing, I have that disabled. Performance display on, it shows me what FPS and ping and stuff I have in the top right there. Communication filter, I have that set to everybody, so it doesn't necessarily matter who's talking in chat. I can always see what they're saying. Reticle, this is always going to be personal preference. As of lately, I've been running a little bit of a green type of vibe, but my auto exec will make it purple. So, I've been kind of going back and forth between the two. Laser sight, also personal preference. I keep this on yellow personally, just because it's pretty bright, Colorblind mode, I have this on tritanopia. Again, this is personal preference, or if you're colorblind, depending on what color blindness you have, this is very useful. I just keep it on tritanopia for some of the different colors that it gives it overall in the game. Subtitles I have off. We don't want to run these. This makes it to where like every comm is all written out on your screen. Way too much visual clutter. Not something we want usually. And then subtitle size normal doesn't matter because we have that off. Enable accessible chat features off, and then convert incoming voice to text chat definitely off, and play incoming text chat as speech 100% off. If you have this on, this will make it to where someone says or whatever someone types on screen, this will type out. So I just be funny here.
Forbi_M4 says balls.
Nice. All right, moving on. We have the mouse and keyboard settings. So if you are a controller player, this will not necessarily make a difference for you. Not very relevant for you guys since you're on the rolla. Nothing against that, but we'll be going over the mouse and keyboard settings here for you guys. So I plan a 0.7 at a 1600 DPI. If you guys don't know what that means, DPI is dots per inch, and I have a higher rate so that my mouse is a little bit more responsive overall. So if you're playing on like 800 DPI, this would be 1.4. Or 400 DPI, that would be 3.2. So depending on how you want to convert it, you can always go to this website I'll put up on screen now, and then you can go over and convert the sends based on what DPI you're on, or if you want to convert it to something else. Now for ADS senses, I have this kind of ranged out here. This is also a new setting. I actually didn't realize this was here, but Seer Passive also has a different sense number. But I have all of this set into my profile.cfg if you just want to copy and paste this. But I have a different sense for each optic so that it feels relatively consistent throughout. Because if you have this set to one setting, the higher or the more zoomed in senses will be like way slower than you're used to. Now moving on, mouse acceleration, you usually would want this off. Some people might want to play with it on, but for most you'll want to keep this off. Mouse invert off, clamp mouse cursor to game window. A lot of people would like this to be on so that, you know, your mouse doesn't go left or right of the screen onto different monitors. I like having this off personally so that I can scroll on like Twitter or something on a different monitor without having to tab out. Lighting effects, I have these off. It's just kind of like, you know, colored lighting for your keyboards and stuff. RGB, like responsiveness. Definitely don't want to have that on for me personally. Now for the keybinds, move forward W. You know, all of these you can kind of slow down and go over if you want to, but the important ones are going to be the scroll wheel up set to move forward for tap strafing, and then jump set to scroll wheel down for jumping. Now, these are the only two that you're going to want binded. A lot of players in the past have gone over and done interact on scroll wheel and stuff like that, but it's generally not something you want to do. As a mouse and keyboard player, you want to have tap, strafe, and jump on those scroll wheels so that you can do movement to the best of your ability. But I have C for crouch toggle and control for crouch hold. So C allows me to do my super glides with toggle, and then I have my normal crouch on left control. And then the other binds that kind of make a difference, because I pretty much play on default binds, just in case you guys are wondering. But you know, I have inspect weapon on my mouse button 5, and then voice chat on mouse button 4. That allows me to be able to, you know, spam inspect with my side button and then talk to people on that as well. And then left alt is my survival item. So if I have a heat shield, I'll hit left alt and be chilling there. Now, the only other bind that you won't see in here is my left shift to walk. And that's because that is something that is set up in the profile.cfg that we're able to create that bind without it being physically in game, because the walk bind, like the walk type of bind doesn't really exist in Apex. There's no like, you know, walk button. So we created the bind manually in the profile.cfg. Now, skipping over the controller side, you know, you guys can play any sense you guys want. I will tell you that the broken senses are like 4-4, 4-3 linear or classic, 5-4 classic, 5-4 linear, anything along those lines you're going to go crazy with. I was playing on ALCs for a little bit, but I don't even know if these are still good. I haven't played controller in a long time, so if you end up copying these, do it with a grain of salt, but I'm sure it'll be okay. Now, video settings, what everyone here wants to see. So I play on a stretch resolution personally. I play on 1610 1920 by 1200. Now the reason I play on this sense, or this, sorry, not this sense, this res, is because I play on a 1440p monitor, but I still want to play a stretch res. So one res, if your monitor will allow it, and it's a 1440p res for you to use, would be 2304 by 1440. Now, that is a good res to play on as a stretched 1440 player, but most people aren't playing on a 1440p resolution. So for most people, if you're playing on a 1080p monitor, I would say play 1728 by 1080, which is what I was recommending in my last settings video, which was when I was on 1080p. But 1728 by 1080 is like the best stretch res that you can get for this game. I will be coming out with a video about how to set up CRU if you guys don't want to do it through NVIDIA control panel, but CRU is a little bit better. But I'll kind of walk people through on how to do that at a later time. Moving on, we have brightness set to 60%. This is a pretty good middle ground for like overall brightness and contrast in the game. For colors, field of view, I had this set to 110, but we play 120 because of the auto exec that we have. We have the FOV scale set to 1.7, which allows us to get a higher FOV. FOV abilities scaling, we have set disabled. Sprint view shake, we have minimal, because you don't want the sprint view shake to, you know, be shaking your screen constantly. We want to have as little shake as possible so that we can focus on what we're shooting. And then the FOV ability scaling, we have that disabled for like Octane Stim going to 120 FOV, but it won't really make a difference because you'll be playing on 120 anyway. VSync, we have disabled. NVIDIA Reflex, you can either have this set to enabled or enabled plus boost. I'm actually going to set this down to enabled just because on a higher end system, you usually want to have this set to enable as opposed to plus boost. But adaptive resolution FPS target, we want to have that set to 0, and this will also be disabled because this is set to 0. Anti-aliasing, this is a setting that is still enabled through the auto exec, but it's kind of up to you as to whether or not you want to have this on. You should get better performance having this off, but like I said, if you guys want to have non-rough edges, because As you can see, all of the edges are a little bit rough, but if we turn anti-aliasing back on, that roughness kind of goes away. So, you know, it is up to you on what you want to do with that, but for texture streaming budget, this will say none for you, but if you use my my files for video config and autoexec, this will actually give you a 1 GB option. So instead of none and 2 GB, it's like there's a middle ground at 1 GB that makes it to where it's not full potato, but you know, it still looks decent and is playable, and uses less VRAM for you. Everything else here in the video settings, we want to have this set to low. Now, this is also a new setting, map detail. This was set to high for me, but low will actually make it to where there are actually some things that would normally be in the map that will be missing, just to increase your FPS overall. So if you're looking for as high FPS as possible, put this to low and you should see a little bit of a jump there. But everything after texture filtering is all on the lowest setting that it can possibly go to. This will make it to where your Apex is running at the highest frame rate that it can based on the settings that is, you know, given to it within the game. Now, audio, this is kind of general overall. You know, my master volume is based on my audio setup, so this will vary based on, you know, what kind of audio system you have going. But I run this at about 50 to 60 in game whenever I'm here. When I'm in the range, it drops down to about 10 just because it's way louder for some reason. But I have this set to push to talk. You always want to have that to push to talk. But the sound effects volume I have at 100, dialogue 25, music and lobby music, we have that set all the way to 0. And then sound in the background we have off as well. So, you know, it's up to you guys on what you want to use with this. I will say sound in background, if you're a common ranked player, you want to have this on just so if you're tabbed out, you can still hear that you're in a game without having to focus on, you know, tabbing back in and seeing what's going on. But yeah, that about does it for the in-game settings. We'll go over to NVIDIA control panel and see what we have there. All right, now for NVIDIA control panel, we're going to right click our desktop, and this is only for NVIDIA GPUs. So if you don't have an NVIDIA graphics card on PC, then this is not for you. But if we'll go to, we'll right click here and go to NVIDIA control panel. And once this opens here, we have a couple different settings we want to go through, right? So the first one is going to be, we want to go to adjust image settings with preview here at the top. We want to make sure that we bring this slider, and we'll use my preference emphasizing, and then we'll slide this, because this should be quality if you haven't done this already. We'll slide this all the way over from quality down to performance. If you want to go in the middle, it'll make it balanced, but most people, you want to keep this on performance, and then you just hit apply. Now after this, we're going to go to manage 3D settings. This is where most of the NVIDIA control panel settings are going to be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go down all of these settings. I'll try to explain them as best as I can. Some of them I'm not 100% sure on, but overall, I have a pretty optimized 3D settings set for just overall every game, not even just Apex specifically. But all of these, you know, ambient occlusion will have off, anisotropic filtering off, anti-aliasing FXAA will have that off. Gamma correction, you know, you can have this on or off. It's kind of just like an auto correction for how bright games are for you. It works pretty well overall, so you can keep that on if you want to. Anti-aliasing mode off, background application max frame rate off. Definitely want to have that off. You know, it doesn't necessarily matter too much, but it's kind of like if your application's in the background, you want to set a frame rate for it. It doesn't really matter. We want to have that off. GPUs, you can have this set to all, or you can just set this to the graphics card that you have. System fallback policy, or sysmem fallback policy, sorry. Driver default is fine for this. You could have no sysmem fallback, but I just kind of leave this on driver default for CUDA. I'm not 100% sure what this setting should be overall, but I just kind of leave this to default for that. Low latency mode, we want to have that set to ultra so that we have the lowest latency we can possibly get. Max frame rate, we have that off. If you want to have this on, you can set this to your monitor's refresh rate, and that will be the max that your frame rate will be overall in every game. But I keep this off personally. Monitor technology, we want to keep this on fixed refresh. Now, you can have this on G-Sync or G-Sync compatible, but I keep it on a fixed refresh rate because there are some games where I'm running G-Sync and some games where G-Sync just doesn't work that great. So I keep it at fixed refresh so that my monitor is running at 360 hertz at all times, which, like I said, that varies based on what monitor you have. GDI compatibility, I have this set to auto, but you can set this to prefer performance. That is another good setting for you to have. OpenGL rendering GPU auto select, but you can just select your graphics card if you want to. Power management mode is one of the most important settings in this list, but we'll set that to perform maximum performance so that your PC is always trying to get as much power as it can. And then everything else here, matters a little bit less, but preferred refresh rate, highest available. You want to have that set for so that your monitor will always get the highest refresh rate it can. Shader cache size, I have this set to driver default. I don't really want to mess with shader cache size because it kind of, you know, keeps a certain amount cached so that I can refer back to it in certain places, but I keep this on driver default so that I can decide automatically. And then texture filtering, we want that set to quality. That's another important setting here, or performance, sorry, not quality. Now, you can set this to high performance if you're on a lower end system. It will make it to where your texture filtering on other games may not look that great, but you will get higher FPS overall. I just have this set to performance because it's kind of like a middle ground between, you know, quality and performance or high performance. Trilinear optimization, I have this set to on. And then everything else here is turned off or auto for threaded optimization and triple buffering or vertical sync. Vertical sync you definitely want off. Never have this on. But everything else is pretty good to go here. Now, if we move on to the configs and such here, we're only worried about the autoexec and videoconfig.txt as well as the profile and settings. So we'll go into that. So to find these, you're going to go into your local disk here and then go to users, your name, and then saved games, respawn, Apex. If you want to do it the easy way, you can just type in saved games. Sometimes mine goes to a different folder though. So as you can see here, we have saved games, but one has respawn, one doesn't. So it goes into my default user automatically. So if this happens to you, this is how you get to it. But we'll click respawn, Apex, profile, profile.cfg. And then you're going to want to replace the file that I put in the folder in the description. You're going to want to replace your profile.cfg with mine. And then as we can see the difference here, some of the key takeaways out of this guy is just overall like your sensitivities as well as different HUD settings that you may have. All of these are pretty well optimized in terms of just like the game overall. The profile.cfg is a little bit less important as the other ones, but this is kind of like the game settings. So if you want to have my game settings without doing all the stuff I showed you before, this would be the way to do it. Now, if we go back into local, we have settings and videoconfig.txt. So let's start with video config. If we go into here, there are some things that you may need to change about my video config that you need to make for yours. So if you have the 1728 by 1080 resolution and you're playing on 1080p, you'll have to change this last display width and last display height to 1920 by 1080. And then if you have the 1728 res, you would change this to 1728 by 1080. And that's pretty much all you would need to do for this. But I just want to make it abundantly clear that realistically, it should change it on its own when you launch Apex for the first time. But if it doesn't and your game is launching in like 720p or something like that, this would be how to fix it. But everything else here is pretty solid. Those would just be the things that you would have to change for that. Now going into settings.cfg, this is going to be all of your binds. This is everything that I use or that, you know, would be a little bit different. But we have a lot of different stuff in here. Some of them I use, some of them I do not. But realistically, one of the more important ones is the left shift plus walk bind. So this is that's going to allow you to walk like I showed you guys earlier, as well as the F keys that allow you to change your frame rate. Where are these guys? There we go. So F3, F4, F5. I don't use these much anymore because I've upgraded my computer, so I don't really have to worry about my frames dropping. However, if you're on a lower end system, you can test with different frame rates and different caps. However, this goes up to 300. So if you're on a 144 hertz monitor, generally you'll want to keep your frame rate at 144 hertz without having to really, you know, change it a whole lot. But it's kind of dependent on what your frame rate is. So I have this, or what your refresh rate is. So if I have this set to 144, but I'm on a 240 hertz monitor, it may feel a little bit odd, but if you're doing that for consistencies, because you can consistently get 144 frames, that is usually what you'd want to do. I played very often on 180, 190, or upwards of 240, but there were a lot of times where I just could not get 240 frames, so I would keep it at a 180 consistent so that I would stay consistent with my super glides or whatever movement I was trying to do without, you know, physically feeling the frame drops that we were getting. And then left all, you can see this is for my survival slot, which would be my heat shields and such. But this was changed in game, so you can always change it there as well. All right, now the last thing that you have to do is go into whatever game launcher you have the game on. I play on EA personally. And then you would go into manage, view properties, and you'll copy and paste these here. I'll leave these in the description for you guys. But this is going to make it to where it executes the auto exec off the bat from the moment you launch the game. CL is soften locale 1. This is what gives you the red flare instead of blood when you're shooting people in the game. So if you kill someone, it will give you blood normally, but if you use this command line, it will actually make it a red flare as opposed to the blood. It's up for debate whether or not it's actually removing visual clutter or not, but I've been using it for a long time, so I keep it on personally. And then minus dev, this makes it to where the intro screen goes away. It just launches straight to the continue screen. And then everything else here, you know, we have full screen, novid. That's also part of dash dev. It's just there for good measure. Preload doesn't really have a lot to do with it, but it helps sometimes in terms of being able to launch Apex faster. DX level 95, not really that crazy useful, but it's more for the DirectX like launcher for this. And then these commands here, the letterbox aspect, this is for when you're running like super stretched res, so you don't really have to worry about these guys if you're not running super stretched like 4:3 res. And then FPS max 237. Now this is another thing that's up for debate, but I have found a lot more consistency with running 3 frames below the cap that you actually want to run. So if I want to go 240 FPS, I'd run 237 so that it's more consistent and there's less frame time between each frame that it's creating. But that could be placebo. You could have it set to 240. It's up to you guys, but that's what I run personally. But that'll do it for today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I haven't made one of these in about 5 months, so it's been a little bit overdue for that. But if you guys enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys so much. I will be dropping more tutorials here soon. I'm going to be doing an OBS guide as well as like how to warm up, how to improve your aim part 2, maybe a little movement guide this season. We'll see. But I love you guys. Show some love. You guys have a great rest of your day. Peace out.